Outside is the place to go. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Hold up.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Scott Monty from Quitlam Search and Rescue, and I'm stoked for my 2-week winter camping trip starting on Friday. Oh, and I'm also taking care of Zoom and Facebook Live tonight. Your cameras and mics are off for the session, but we still want to hear from you. If you have a question, throw it in the Q&A box, and we'll keep track of it, and then we'll either answer live or online. If you don't want the audience to see your name, just make sure to mark that as anonymous. I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat box and posting links there as we go. So I need you guys to help me out here. Let's give your fingers a bit of a flex and test out the reactions button. That's the little smiley face. Give me 1 heart for each time that you've changed your plans because of poor winter weather. If you've done it 5 times, give me 5 hearts. Also, give me a shocked face for every single time you've seen an avalanche occurring in the wild. Ooh, there's some avalanches too. Smiley, oh, there's a laughing face. I'm not sure what that means. By the way, if you stick around with us to the end and you're on Zoom, you'll have a chance to win an AST1 course from tonight's guest, Canada West Mountain School. And you'll also have a chance possibly to win a giveaway from our supporters, Bright Source and Rico. No matter what, everyone will get a freebie in their email tomorrow from our supporter, FatMap. To get us started, I'd like to welcome the persistent education layer of search and rescue prevention here in the province, the Executive Director of BC AdventureSmart, none other than Sandra Riches.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to see all the reactions. We already have some little insight to who our audience is this evening. Thanks for joining us. It's really great to have everyone here. It's exciting to be together again as we make our way through the webinar series. This is our 4th event of 10. They run right through until the end of March, middle of March, let me take that back. And tonight, this is our last session before the holidays really kick off. We're really excited to introduce our guest, but before that, I'd like to share a few insights about search and rescue and how you are making a difference by joining us tonight, and all the prep that you do, all the planning, all the chats with your friends, all the packing of your packs, all the gear that you buy, the training that you take, the communications that you set up to make it work for you are making a difference. You're helping your group and you, of course, but you're also helping the 3,400 search and rescue volunteers in the province of BC. They're all search and rescue members. Scott is one of those 3,400, and they all belong to 78 search and rescue groups in British Columbia. Every year, collectively, all groups respond to 1,500 search and rescue calls. All of those calls are collected into a data management system, and then we figure out where they're happening, why they're happening, and then I get to go in there with our team here at the BC Search and Rescue Association, BC AdventureSmart's program, and figure out how do we reach those people? How do we reach the hikers in the summer? And how do we reach the snowshoers and the backcountry ski tours and the snowmobilers in the wintertime? And where are they doing all of this in the province? So all of that's at my fingertips, which is really exciting. So thanks to the likes of Scott and all of them out there, the 3,400 who respond to 1,500 calls a year currently. That changes every little while, depending on trends and interests, weather patterns, increase in outdoor recreation, promotion of a lot changes in that. But right now it's 1,500 a year. And they all respond to those calls. They volunteer, they leave their family and their friends, they leave Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, change plans for vacation, take vacation to do training for search and rescue. They're pretty incredible members. So thanks to Scott and all of them. Before I introduce our guest, I also wanted just to talk a little bit about what the top 3 reasons for search and rescue are in British Columbia, and then I'll happily introduce our guest tonight. In that data, we know that the top 3 reasons for search and rescue are injury. More than not, it's slips, trips, and falls that can be mitigated with really good, strong, sturdy footwear. So think about trips, slips, and falls when you're getting ready for your next adventure, and think about your footwear. So injury is number 1. The second one is getting lost and disoriented. If you understand and can successfully navigate using a map and compass, the tools that you have with you to route find, plan before, but also navigate in the field, you can help mitigate and reduce those calls for getting lost and disoriented. The third one's a little bit trickier. That one's really up to you. Well, they're all up to you. But that one's really up to you because it's all about decision making. The third one is exceeding abilities. The third most common reason for search and rescue in BC are those adventurers who exceed their abilities. Maybe the hike was too far. Maybe they pushed themselves too much through a weather pattern. Maybe they didn't have a really good breakfast and they didn't go out fueled, and now they're bonking on the trail and they're not able to continue, but they exceed their abilities on an empty stomach. There's a lot involved in those scenarios, but just to give you some preface. So if you can think about injury, getting lost and disoriented, and exceeding abilities as you plan and get out there for your adventures, you can also help reduce the number and severity of search and rescue calls. Okay, how do we jump into our guest here? Brent's been working in the outdoor industry since 2008, a process that has meant more hard work and determination than he ever could have imagined. Many get into the outdoor leadership career because it seems like an easy and fun way to earn a living. Brent certainly can't argue with that and how much fun it is, but it's the furthest thing from easy. What keeps Brent going is the rewarding sense of accomplishment as he helps others discover the joys of getting into the mountains and having fun while staying safe. Brent teaches Avalanche skills training for Canada West Mountain School. That's the hat of many he's wearing this evening. His students range from beginner snowshoers, maybe some of you are in the crowd, to advanced skiers and snowboarders, to members of various industry groups as well, looking to go beyond the ropes to really practice those skills and get a little bit better, sharpen their pencil, if you will. He also teaches for the Outdoor Rec program at Capilano University and the Trek Outdoor Rec Education program. I'd like us all to give a big thumbs up to our guest this evening, Brent Hiller from Canada West Mountain School. And the stage is yours. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you very much. Well, hello, everybody. I'm going to just bring up my screen here and share a presentation, but I'm excited to be here. And 2 seconds here. You should be able to see this momentarily. There we go. So I'm currently on the traditional territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam nations, and I just want to highlight that first. Like Sandra mentioned, my name's Brent Hiller, and I'm an outdoor educator with Canada West Mountain School. As you can see right there, there's my biggest ski partner right now is my son, and we're waiting patiently for snow to appear on our local mountain, which is Mount Seymour. So hopefully that comes soon. We're out in North Vancouver, and I do the bulk of my work with Canada West Mountain School, which is an outdoor education company, and I spend a lot of my winter doing avalanche courses. And I was just out today actually with a family doing some avalanche awareness, which was great. And what I wanted to do this evening was kind of take you through some of the material that we teach in an avalanche skills training course. But I do want to kind of preface that this is certainly not an avalanche skills training course, and we want to make sure that you get more training if you're going to go out into the backcountry. So just kind of before we really dive into things, I want to just talk about there's really three categories of things that that need to be out in the mountains for us to have avalanche hazard. And this is going to kind of take us through the conversation this evening. And the first thing is avalanche terrain. And the second thing is snow and a snowpack. And that third thing is us. And if we're not out there, then we don't have any type of avalanche hazard. So what I want to begin with this evening is talking about that first one, us. And so let's just begin by kind of getting to know all of you. And so there's a couple questions that you're going to have pop up on your screen, and we'd love for you to kind of answer those questions just to get to know a couple things: where you come from, how you recreate out in the backcountry, and as well how long you've been out there recreating in the backcountry. Some of you might have been out there for many, many years, and others maybe just for a little bit.
Look at them pour in.
There we go.
Let me share it with everyone here.
There we go. Awesome. So lots of snowshoers, lots of hikers. That's I spend a lot of my time, especially here on the North Shore, working with snowshoers and hikers. That's great to see. We got a number of backcountry skiers and some snowmobilers. And that second question there, how long have you been out recreating for?
Look at them go.
There we go. Great. So lots of you have been out there for a good while. So that's wonderful.
We can also check that where they are in the province if you like.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's see where everybody's coming in from.
Sneaking off at the bottom, you'll also find northern BC and outside BC as options. But it looks like the vast majority of people are coming in from the lower mainland and the coast mountains.
Awesome. That's great. Perfect. Thanks everybody for doing that. It always helps to kind of know where folks are coming from, as well as what type of knowledge they're kind of bringing in. So focusing in on the first part of that hazard triangle. So there's that terrain, there's that snowpack, but it's the people that I want to kind of think about first. The majority of people involved in avalanches actually started them themselves. And so this is actually something that I take a lot of confidence from. What this actually says is that avalanches aren't random, or at least avalanche accidents aren't random. They come from a decision-making process, and often at this point a kind of a failure in that decision-making. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the harsh facts around avalanches. And the first one is that most people fully buried in avalanches are killed. And so that's really why we need to avoid ever being caught and buried in an avalanche. And then most people buried alive will suffocate in less than 30 minutes. And that's why those avalanche rescue skills are so critical, and something that we spend a lot of time in an avalanche course teaching. Because if we stand a chance of getting somebody out alive, it's through those rescue skills. And then most victims are recreational travelers. So this is people out there recreating. Avalanches, for the most part, aren't hurting or injuring or killing people that are driving on our highways, out working. It's people going out there to have fun. It's on our days off that this stuff happens. And here's kind of a breakdown of the last 10 winters, right up until last year, and kind of the categories that make up avalanche fatalities. These numbers come from Canada. Most of these avalanche fatalities kind of occur in British Columbia and what I like to call the cool part of Alberta, that really fun mountainous part of Alberta. But we have avalanches all over the country. There's been avalanche accidents out in Newfoundland, and we've actually got a forecast region out in Newfoundland right now. But a couple things that I want to highlight with this slide is you can see that the number one kind of user group at risk is snowmobiling. And to be honest with you, that's really starting to come down. So probably if we looked at just the last 5 years, we'd see a lot of kind of similar totals between backcountry users, skiers and snowboarders, and snowmobilers. And that's partly because the snowmobiling crowd has done a really good job of getting educated the last little while. And so there was certainly a spike in accidents that started kind of about 20 years ago. And that number has come down quite a bit. And that's something that has been absolutely great to see as somebody who's working in the avalanche industry. The one thing that we do see is kind of some more of that kind of other recreation category. That's the number that's kind of been on the rise a little bit. And hidden in that other recreation category would be kind of the hikers and the snowshoers and those kind of micro spikers. And what's interesting is they actually have a lot in common with the snowmobiling crowd. There's a lot of great technology that's involved with getting out there, and snowshoes are getting lighter. They work. You can go up really steep terrain in them, but they're very affordable. And so that's something, as an avalanche educator, I work really hard to make sure that not only are we empowering folks like yourselves potentially to be getting out in the backcountry, but that we're also making sure that you're doing it safely. And that's really important to us. From 1996 to 2023, there's an average of about 12.9 deaths per winter. And we are seeing those numbers kind of come down each year. Last year was a bit of an anomaly, and we had a really dangerous snowpack. But our recreation fatalities have come down pretty consistently, which is great. The average age is about 34 years old, which is kind of a little bit older than a lot of the other kind of accidents that we see out there generally. Younger people are more at risk of accidents. We see that with motor vehicle accidents, that type of thing. And then 88.7% are male. And I don't think that's because 88.7% of recreationists are male. There's probably something to that. We don't need to get into that too much, but there's certainly some of us out there that might be statistically a little bit more at risk. But these are kind of general numbers, right? And so sometimes these statistics don't really mean too much when it comes to our own personal decision making. Again, coming back to that one of those first things that I mentioned, though, was the majority of people involved in avalanches started the avalanche themselves. And 92% of avalanche accidents are human triggered, and 83% are caused by those involved. And so again, this is something that I really take a lot of confidence with, that this tells me that there's a chance for me to make the right decision out there. And we try to use the 4 pillars of avalanche safety to make those safe decisions. And the first is understanding avalanche terrain. The other one is understanding snow conditions. Weather, which is directly related to snow conditions. It's very important that we figure that out. And that last one is the human factor, kind of understanding who we are as an individual. And we need to have all 4 of these to make safe decisions. But it's that human factor piece that over the last, I'd say about a decade, in the avalanche industry, we've started to address a lot more. We're realizing that, yes, avalanche accidents happen in avalanche terrain. And yes, avalanche accidents happen because of an instability within our snowpack. But it's the decision-making process that leads to us choosing to go into the avalanche terrain and getting caught potentially. And there's nothing to say that decision isn't incredibly difficult. There's a lot of aspects to trying to make that decision. And we're going to talk a little bit about that this evening. But again, I can't stress this enough. It's very important that if you want to get out there into avalanche terrain, or you want to get out there into the backcountry, if you haven't already, it's important to take an avalanche course. And if you have taken an avalanche course, strongly encourage you to continue that process of learning. Go for an AST2 course or look for a refresher course. So we're going to kind of go through a few different things this evening. And what I want to start with here as we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of avalanches is just talk about the formation and nature of avalanches. So there's really two main types of avalanches. And the first one is a loose snow avalanche. This is sometimes called a point release. Here's a photo of one. There's those little starting points at the top. These can be small, but they get bigger the further down the mountain they kind of travel. There's the deposit down there at the bottom. Maybe there's enough snow down there to bury a person. But with a loose snow avalanche, often what we're worried about is the terrain itself having consequences. So getting pulled off of that cliff can be a real problem there. Now, the second main type of avalanche is a slab avalanche. And so one of the ways that we really kind of identify these is they've got a prominent crown line or fracture line at the top. They slide on a hard bed surface. And here's a photo of one right there. There we can see the crown line right there. There's the bed surface down there at the bottom. And there's the debris or the runout. Now, what makes these more dangerous than a loose snow avalanche is how they fail. So here's a great example of this snowboarder. This is kind of a screenshot taken right from the moment of this avalanche initiating from a video. And you can see where the snowboarder is when they trigger this avalanche. The slab kind of fractures all around them, which means that straight away, there's a lot of snow involved in this avalanche. And that's where they become really problematic because we get a lot of snow. Here's an example of a slab avalanche. You can see the crown line here kind of goes all the way up and over to the other bowl. Here's another crown line right there. And once an avalanche has happened, it's not to say that it's safe to be there. So arguably, I don't know if this is the best place for this person to be standing right now, but I'm going to assume because they're wearing a red jacket, they must be an avalanche professional. So hopefully they know what they're doing there. But I would caution standing underneath of these crown lines. The other photo that's on this slide, you can see that bed surface is very hard looking. It almost looks like a sheet of ice. So standing on that could be very slippery and problematic. Here's another slab avalanche. This one's kind of in motion. Again, it's the crown lines at the top that define whether or not these are a slab avalanche. Now here's another avalanche. This one's not a slab avalanche. This is a loose snow avalanche. This one looks fairly wet. Maybe this is a wet, loose avalanche. Pinwheeling is another term. You can see those little balls of snow kind of rolling down to the bottom of the mountain. Here's another one. This one, again, a loose snow avalanche. Now, there's 3 parts of an avalanche path. And we can see up at the top where the crown line is. That's what we refer to as the start zone. And then in the middle, we call that the track. This is where the avalanche starts to really pick up speed, pick up momentum. And then at the bottom where the deposit potentially will come to a stop, we refer to that as the runout zone. And here's an example of what that actually looks like in real life. So we have the start zone at the top, the track in the middle, and the runout's probably just kind of out of the picture frame there down at the bottom. But we also have smaller avalanches, avalanche paths within this piece of terrain. So not every time that there's an avalanche in this area does it go all the way to the very bottom, what we refer to as like full pull or two valley bottom, or an avalanche that runs to the bottom of the track, or full run out. That would be a catastrophic major event. And that can certainly happen. And we know that that happens because there's no trees in that avalanche path. But sometimes these go smaller. Here's another one. This, you can just see faintly there's a bit of a crown line at the top, and this isn't quite as obvious as the other one, but there's no trees in this area. So why are there no trees in this spot? Well, that's because avalanches happen, on a somewhat regular basis. Here's an avalanche path in the summer. This is actually a really good way to kind of see what avalanches, where avalanches go, is by looking at these areas in the summer. And one of the things that some avalanche professionals will do is they'll go out to these places in the summertime and they'll actually take core samples of these trees that are either growing on the outskirts of these avalanche paths or in the center. And by looking at the age of the trees, essentially by counting the rings of those trees, we can see how often an avalanche goes down, or when the last time an avalanche went down that avalanche path. It's a great way for us to kind of measure frequency. And also, avalanche paths cannot be as clean as that. Like, this is a bit of an avalanche path here, and it's not quite as obvious. So it's not always those big, huge swaths of no trees. It can be just these little kind of mundane slopes, but the tree cover is a really good indicator for us, especially here in Canada, where a lot of our mountains, at least lower down on the mountains, there's forest. And so I rely quite heavily on trees, or more specifically, the lack of trees, to kind of tell me about the avalanche frequency. We measure avalanches in 5 different sizes, and the smallest avalanche size is a size 1, and it's relatively harmless. It could be 10 tons of snow though, and 10 tons is roughly equivalent to 10 elephants. And so what I like to think about this is, hey, maybe I don't want to go off of that cliff, but 10 elephants could persuade me to go off of that cliff. And so a size 1 avalanche could push me somewhere that I don't want to go. And so there is still risk associated with a size 1 avalanche. As far as the actual size of a size 1 avalanche, I think of it as about the size of a ping pong table. And so not huge, not enough snow to bury me, but again, it could take you somewhere that you don't want to go. And here's an example of a size 1 avalanche. This is a loose snow size 1 avalanche, but we also have size 1 slab avalanches as well. In fact, when I'm out in the mountains, I'm always looking for little tiny slopes like this, and I'm using them as test slopes. I actually am, in a way, trying to trigger size 1 slab avalanches, because if I can trigger a size 1 slab avalanche, then that tells me that I need to stay away from slopes that are bigger. I'm not going on a slope that's the size of a size 2 and hoping I only get a size 1 avalanche out of it. I'm going onto a slope that's literally the size of a size 1 avalanche and trying to see if that's going to go. And if it does, that tells me that I should probably avoid slopes that are bigger. And so we go from a size 1 to a size 2, and a size 2 could bury, injure, or kill a person. So it really escalates quite quickly. And sometimes with these avalanche sizes, we hear about we hear about half sizes, so 2.5s and 3.5s and 4.5s. I would strongly encourage you, anytime you read about a size 1.5 avalanche, to just round it up to 2. And the reason for that is, there's no such thing as a half of a could. The definition of a size 2 avalanche, it's 100 tons of snow. It can travel for 100 meters. It's about the size of a tennis court. But the main definition of a size 2 is that it could bury, injure, or kill a person. And so half of a could, it doesn't really make sense. It can't half could injure you, half could bury you, half could kill you. So it's best to kind of round up there. And within the context of being half buried, it depends on which half of you is buried. If your feet are sticking out of the snow, that doesn't really do you any good. And so it's really important to kind of give those 1.5s the respect that they deserve, and just round them up to 2 to be safe. Here's an example of a size 2 avalanche. And here's another example of a size 2 avalanche. This piece of terrain is really mellow, I would describe it. Like, this is kind of this probably surprised the individual that took this photo. I wouldn't expect that slope to slide very often. I bet you it doesn't slide very often. And that's why the person who took this photo was like, wow, I got to take a photo of that, because it's quite rare, but it's steep enough to go. Here's a size 3. Now we're dealing with 1,000 tons of snow. These things can travel a kilometer. This is where we're starting to see trees getting broken and destroyed. And it's about the size of a football field worth of snow. So these avalanche sizes, they increase kind of exponentially. They get bigger and bigger and bigger as we kind of as we kind of progress up. And then size 4 avalanche. This is now where we're dealing with like 10 football fields, but it really doesn't matter. 1 football field, 2 football fields. These are massive, and we're destroying up to 4 hectares of forest. We're destroying trucks, buildings. These are huge. You know, entire valleys are going. And then we have size 5s, which are really rare. And the reason why these are rare is because if we do have places that could be affected by them, we're managing them in a way. So we've got all these bombing programs that happen on our highways or in our ski resorts. And so these don't happen in places, for the most part, that could affect any infrastructure. And what I mean by infrastructure is highways, buildings, that kind of thing. It's not to say that we're as a province we're protecting, you know, random areas in the backcountry, but definitely we want to protect this highway. That highway is very critical for all sorts of reasons. And so now what we're going to do is kind of dig into that terrain aspect. So again, thinking back to that hazard triangle, we need all 3 of those to be present in the mountains for us to have avalanche hazard. Hopefully that's starting to make a little bit more sense. And so now let's look at just the terrain aspect of that. And one of the things that you're given in an avalanche course, and if it's been a little while since you've taken an avalanche course and you don't recognize this card, I'd encourage you to either take a refresher course, because there's been a lot of new kind of resources added in the avalanche program, the avalanche skills training course that happens here in Canada. And this evaluator is a wonderful tool. And we're going to focus on this blue box of the evaluator right now and just look at terrain. So the very first one on here is slope steepness. And it says, is the slope steepness between 30 and 35 degrees, or is the slope steeper than 35 degrees? We give ourselves a point for the first one, and give ourselves 2 points for the second one. So let's talk about slope angle. Essentially, between like less than 30 degrees, we don't really see a lot of slab avalanches occurring. And when we're talking about slope angle, we're talking about the steepest part of the slope, what we call the start zone, right? We think back to that avalanche path, the very top of the avalanche path in the start zone. Now, between 30 and 45 degrees, that's where we see the largest slab avalanches happening. And between 45 degrees and 60 degrees, we actually have infrequent large slab avalanches. And that's not to say that that slope angle is safe, but what's happening there is we have lots of small avalanches happening at that slope angle. The terrain is so steep that it's what we call self-regulating. It slides naturally. We get natural triggered avalanches. Now, above 45 degrees, if you're a skier, it's incredibly steep. So don't think that like, oh, I'm just going to ski 60 degrees and I'll be safe, right? We're incredibly safe. All the way to the extreme end of things, when things are between 60 and 90 degrees, we don't really even have slab avalanches. We just have constant loose snow avalanches. And to be honest with you, if you're a skier or a snowboarder out in the backcountry, you're not skiing and snowboarding this terrain. This is rock climbing now. It's a different sport, and there's other risk involved here. Most of our most common terrain that we like to recreate in, especially if your goal is to slide. So this is even more specific to the skiers and snowboarders on the group here. That's the common terrain that we like to be in, and it happens to be one of the most common slope angles that can avalanche. And here's where we look at some. I'll try to spare you on these boring graphs, but I think this one really speaks to some really important information. The majority of avalanche accidents here in Canada and Switzerland, this is kind of some combined data, happens between 38 and 40 degrees. And so this is where this question, that first question there, if it's steeper than 35 degrees, we give ourselves 2 points. And then we look at terrain traps. So these are trees, gullies, cliffs, anywhere that being buried in an avalanche could have an increase, could increase the consequences, if you will. So you get pushed into a gully, and now all of a sudden you're going to get buried deeper. And the deeper that you get buried, the harder it is for your friends to kind of dig you out and rescue you. So you give yourself an extra point if you're looking at a piece of terrain that has a terrain trap at the bottom of it. Slope shape is another important one. Is the slope convex or unsupported? Here's an example of a convex slope. Convex slopes are really great spots where avalanches like to release from. And you can see in this example, that's where that avalanche kind of broke, is right there on the convexity. The other one is unsupported slopes. These are slopes kind of above a cliff, if you will. So there's no structure in that snowpack. It just kind of wants to release. There's nothing holding it. It's above this cliff. It's just kind of dangling there. Another area that's really common to trigger an avalanche is around rocks and trees. And the reason for that is the snowpack can be quite thin. And a great example of this, that photo that we looked at the very start of our discussion, that snowboarder, just think to yourself, where did that snowboarder probably trigger that avalanche? And I would say probably right when they went past that rock that was sticking out of the snow. That was probably the likely spot that they triggered the avalanche. And then the last one on this card can be frustrating because it describes forest density, and is the slope in the alpine in a sparsely treed area or in an open forest like a parentheses cut block burn wide space blade. And for me as a skier, that just sounds like really good skiing terrain, like out in the open. That's where I want to ski. And it comes down to the fact that areas that are good skiing and snowboarding terrain, good snowmobiling terrain, those are a little bit more susceptible to avalanches. And it seems like, the gods must be crazy. Like, why is this? But if you think about it, our goal, if you're a skier or snowboarder, is to slide down the mountain. And so, of course, we share common terrain with avalanches. The definition of an avalanche is snow sliding down the mountain. So that's kind of the case. And it is one of the reasons why we see more accidents amongst recreationists that are looking to get on hills. And so sometimes when I'm on my snowshoes, I do a much better job of staying safe because I look at a massive hill and I go, ooh, I don't want to go up that. That seems exhausting. Where when I look at a big, huge, steep slope and I've got my skis on my feet, I'm thinking, oh, how am I going to get down that? That's what I kind of want to do. So that can be really difficult. We talked a little bit about forest density, and we can kind of use those trees to help us identify some of that stuff. So here's some examples of some trees that have clearly been hit by an avalanche. Here's some examples of a tree that doesn't have any branches above it. And one of the things that we've created here in Canada to make understanding avalanche terrain easier is by looking at the ATES rating. So this is the ATES, or Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale. And there's 3 categories. And the first is simple terrain. The second is challenging terrain. It's not to say that there's not avalanche terrain in simple terrain, but it's simple to make safe decisions in simple terrain. In challenging terrain, essentially it's more challenging to make safe decisions in that terrain. And then we get to class 3, which is complex terrain. And this is where we have multiple overlapping avalanche paths, steep open terrain. We have multiple start zones, terrain traps. There's fewer options to reduce our exposure, if any. This is really big terrain. Sometimes we refer to this as big tiger country. There's jungle cats here and they want to kill us, if you will. And then we have complicated glacier travel with extensive crevasse bands and ice falls. And I would even say that we're starting to move away from saying just complicated glacier travel and really just glacier travel in general can make things difficult. And I would strongly encourage you to utilize a resource that Avalanche Canada has on their website. It's under the planning tab, and this is the URL, but you can find it by just searching for the trip planner. And so this is my local mountain that I like to spend a lot of time at. And what we have here is all these green areas are the simple terrain, and all the blue areas are the challenging terrain, and all the black areas are the complex terrain. And it's a great way for you to essentially, exactly what it's describing, plan a trip. So I look at the bulletin and I figure out, okay, what's the right terrain for me? Sorry about that. What's the right terrain for me on this particular day? Now, what I want to talk about next is just a little bit about the snow, and then I want to make sure that we've got space and time for questions here. So just really quickly, snow is incredibly complicated, and it's the thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about, especially the avalanche forecasters. And if we want to go into avalanche terrain, we need to have a good understanding of our snowpack. And so I want to just kind of describe dangerous snow in the most basic way possible. There's essentially 3 ingredients that we need in our snow to have a slab avalanche. And the first one is the slab. We need slabby, cohesive snow on the top there. I know slabby isn't a real word, but we use it a lot in the avalanche world because it really helps us kind of describe the property of snow that we don't really want to see on the surface. And then that slabby snow needs to be sitting on a harder layer that it can slide on. And that's what we refer to as a bed surface. That bed surface could be a sheet of ice, but it doesn't have to be that hard. It just needs to be slightly more dense than the snow that's above it. And then there needs to be this weak layer in between them, this kind of failure to bond, this failure to kind of connect these 2 different types of snow together. And when we have all 3 of those things kind of present in our snowpack, that's when we're at risk of having a slab avalanche. And just looking at the purple box on this evaluator card, one of the questions on here, and the one that I would just want to highlight right now, the other ones are very important as well, but the one that I want to highlight is this 4th one, which is signs of instability. Are there signs of snowpack instability, including whoops, shooting cracks, or drum-like sounds? And so that's definitely something that if we see that, we need to be suspect about our snow. And here's a really good example of what that might look like out in the mountains. So hopefully you've got your AST1. If you haven't gotten your AST1, we want to make sure that you go out and get that. And one of the resources that you're going to have out there is the public avalanche danger scale. We've got kind of 5 categories there. But what I want you to do right now is just think to yourself, what do you think the most dangerous rating here is? Where do you think the most people get buried in an avalanche? And where do you think the most avalanche fatalities occur? So just think about that for a couple seconds here. And so the answer is considerable. And it speaks to the very first thing that we talked about today, which was the people, the human factor. The majority of deaths in North America occur at this danger rating. And I think the biggest reason is because it's about how we feel about the word considerable. Some of us may look at considerable and go, well, it's obviously considerable right now. It's not moderate, which is true. And others of us might look at this and go, well, it's not high. It's only considerable. And so this is where we put, the real problem with avalanche accidents is us, it's people. And so this is where we need to always be kind of striving to get better, get smarter, and stay educated. And this is something that constant education, I think is really important out there. And sometimes when we have no knowledge of something, our confidence can be really high. And as you start to gain some competency, your confidence actually drops down a little bit. And so hopefully folks that are here, I don't mean for you to be down in this trough. Hopefully if you were up here before this webinar and you're feeling here, I hope that we go forwards and we take a course and we want to kind of build you up to be that expert. But it is important to kind of recognize that sometimes our confidence can be a bit too high out there. Familiarity is one of those kind of traps, and actually 69% of avalanche accidents in the United States occurred on what victims described as slopes that were very familiar. This is a slope that I'm very familiar with. This is the face of First Pump on Mount Seymour out in the provincial park. And it took me a decade of being able to say, I've never seen an avalanche there. even though it's like 40 degrees, it's the size of a football field, it ends in a terrain trap. I spent a whole decade being able to say I've never seen an avalanche there. And then one December, I stopped being able to say that. And thankfully, that was a natural, actually, that was a human triggered avalanche, but it wasn't me that triggered it. It was somebody else. I thought it was a natural triggered avalanche, but I actually heard a report later on that it was somebody that triggered it. They actually took a course a couple days later. I don't know when they signed up for the course. Thankfully, everybody was okay and they weren't fully buried. But it's one of those things that just because you haven't seen an avalanche happen on a slope doesn't necessarily mean that it's not possible. You know, we're not on this earth for very long, and avalanches sometimes come in 100-year cycles, 200-year cycles, if you will. And the last slide that I want to just share with you before we kind of put it to questions here is this one. This is a photo that we often share in the avalanche education world, and it's just about awareness. And sometimes avalanche accidents are just a lack of awareness. And the quote that this individual said is, "It looks much closer if you look in the photo, but it was really far away." Well, not really far away, but it was far away from us, he said. I was keeping an eye on it. And I think sometimes it speaks to that spatial awareness that sometimes we don't always have or we lose sight of. So what I want you to do is hopefully this was inspiring. And if you haven't done an AST1 course, I'd love for you to sign up for an AST1 course. If you've done an AST1 course, it would be great to have you sign up for an AST2 course. There's also companion rescue courses, though, and lots of AST refreshers. And I would be remiss if not to direct you to the mountainschool.com, which is Canada West Mountain School's website, where you can certainly find those courses. But there are providers, wonderful providers across all of Canada, providing wonderful courses that are kind of managed and promoted through Avalanche Canada. So please make sure that you take advantage of that. And so with that, I hopefully we've got enough time here, and I'd love to hear some questions if that's possible.
Yeah, we can fit a couple in for sure.
Awesome.
I'll actually just get you to stop sharing your screen there. There you go. And so first off, Karsten came out and asked, is a good rule of thumb to stick to hiking inside the trees unless those trees are at the bottom of a path? So if I'm trying to figure out where to hike, is it enough to just stay in trees and I'll be safe?
Yeah, for the most part, and it has to be really dense trees, right? So when we talk about, you know, from a skiing and snowboarding perspective, like so tight, it's not enjoyable to be in as far as moving downhill. But as we've seen in some of those photos, it's possible that trees can be taken out by avalanches. And so we need to be aware of what's above us. And if the bulletin is talking about, you know, size 4 avalanches being possible, then there's some trees that are going to be safe and there's some trees that aren't going to be safe. So I hate to give you the "it depends" answer, but so much when people ask me questions about avalanches, I end up answering with "it depends." And I know it's very frustrating for my students, but it does really depend. So we always just need to know what's around us and what are we dealing with.
Yeah, so places that you might think are safe on a regular basis might not be safe, and maybe it's worthwhile double checking your resources before you go out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Edward asks, are there tips or tricks to measure slope angle? He doesn't want to, I guess he doesn't want to take out his compass.
Yeah, I mean,
the other kind of compass, right?
Totally. Yeah, you can inclinometers. My compass has an inclinometer on it, which is great. There's tons of iPhone apps and phone apps that you can use to measure slope angle. The issue with measuring slope on a slope is you're already on the slope. And so if it's dangerous, you know, you kind of get up there and you're like, oh yeah, it's 40 degrees up here. This is really, really dangerous. Well, it's too late. You're already on the slope. And so maps can help us a little bit. There's a lot of GPS apps out there that have slope angle shading. It's not exact, but it's a good start. And then a big one is use those low avalanche hazard days to get out into terrain and measure slopes so that you can actually say, no, I've measured that slope. It's 28 degrees. That's a great, if you can definitively say what the slope angle is, then that's the best way.
Yeah, I know they've started to come out with ones where you can from afar take a camera photo, and if the camera is really, really, really good, it can it'll take into account that your phone could be on one angle or another. It'll try an estimate, but again, it's taking only a 2D picture, right? It's not taking a 3D picture. So when you're looking at it, it's going to take the angle at that 2D. Whereas if you were slightly to the side, it might be steeper or not, right?
Yeah, and even our eyeballs, like when you're out and it's
Mm.
bad visibility, it's overcast, like I look at a slope straight on and I think, oh yeah, that's really flat. And then you get on it and it's like, oh nope, it's going straight up. And so that can be really difficult, even with our own eyes.
Any tips for people who like use microspikes and try to go up? Sometimes it's it's an icy, just a completely icy layer. Do icy layers slide too? And like, should I be worried when I'm up on my microspikes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now on the North Shore, and I think across a lot of the province, we're dealing with like really hard conditions in our mountains. And when we're dealing with that, sometimes our bulletins will actually say, our avalanche bulletins will say low, low, low. So the avalanche danger is low. And sometimes when that's the case, the slipping and falling hazard is high, high, high. And so this is something that we need to be aware of, that sometimes we're not worried about avalanches, but that doesn't mean that there's not other risk that's out there. And it's kind of in those situations, we're the slab. We have to make sure that we're not going to slide and hurt ourselves.
Yeah, I know.
So it all
When I
depends.
put on my microspikes, I feel like a mountain goat and I could do anything.
Totally.
Probably a little overconfident, to be honest, but
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, some of these microspikes are so good. Like I would say they're comparable to a pair of crampons at that point.
yeah, for sure.
You see my ski partner poking out behind my corner.
What are
my
your
shoulder there.
what are your thoughts on the current snowpack? So do you think that's going to shape up to be a major weak layer because of this, or do you think that we'll have a solid bed surface?
Yeah, as avalanche professionals, we always have this like, concern of past seasons, and we kind of say like, oh, this is reminding me of this year, that year, but anything's possible. And I know last year we had a lot of concerns at the beginning of the season that it was shaping up to be similar to, I think, 2003, 2004. And it kind of did shape out to be like that. Thankfully not as deadly, although it was a fairly deadly winter. And this season is kind of there as well, but anything's possible. And so it's best just to kind of wait and see. And at the beginning of any season, I'm just cautious. It's all sorts of things can go wrong at the beginning of the season. I haven't skied that much, I don't want to pull any muscles, that kind of thing. But when it comes to the snowpack, I just take my time and just approach the season cautiously. And January is where I might start ramping things up as we know more about our snowpack.
So one other great question. There's a lot of questions, and I'm not going to be able to get to them all again. I'm so sorry, folks. But what is the right number, the right minimum number, I guess, of people to be backcountry skiing with? So
yeah, that's a question I get a lot. It's a good question, because when we think about rescues, obviously we want more diggers. But it's about decision making. And so even though you'd want a ton of diggers there to help save you, what's more important is that you don't get caught in an avalanche. And so we actually see that smaller groups are better out in the backcountry, just statistically. And so me and one other person, we can have a much better conversation with each other and manage the risk, manage the hazard, and communicate better with each other. We see this all the time in our everyday life, where bigger groups, it's harder to manage and harder to communicate in. And the bigger the group, the more you're going to need a leader. And when you have a leader, that leader isn't always chosen for the best of reasons. Like maybe they're just louder, or they just shred harder, or whatever it is, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So smaller is actually
they get the cooler kit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm gonna
So
bring
we don't
Sandra
want
back.
one, that's for sure. We want two or more.
I'm going to bring Sandra back on because this leads into the other question. We've had this question in 4 or 5 different webinars, and it's difficult. And I want both of your takes on this, and then it'll be the last question for the night.
Okay.
How do you deal with the emotions of people who are with you on the trip, and you say, okay, listen, I don't feel comfortable. I think when we heard that woomph, or when we things aren't working that well. How do you, Brent, and then I'll ask Sandra, how do you convince other people that it's time to turn around?
Yeah, it can be tough. That is less about avalanches and more about the group that you're going out there with. And so for me, I choose to recreate in the backcountry with people that, you know, certainly have the skills that they need to recreate out there, but most importantly, people that I trust and people that I know well, you know, people who understand that, like, at the end of the day, you know, this little guy who's running around the background here, that's the most important thing in my life. And you know what, walking away from something, it doesn't bother me. I want to come home at the end of the day, and that's the most important piece. And so I'm always just surrounding myself in people that agree with that mindset.
Sandra, your take?
Brent just summed it up perfectly. You're hired, and it was described really well. And your ski partner's got a great example and a leader right there in your family. Lucky for him. Sound judgment's key, right? We make those decisions in the field out there. But if I could go back to that piece that's before we even hit the trail, and talk about those decisions, you know, get together for nachos and beer and have a chat about the hike next Saturday or next month or next year. And that's also called trip planning, but we just say it a little bit more fun. Beer and nachos sounds way more fun than saying trip plan. But have that conversation and talk about those scenarios. Talk about if you're out there during the summer and you run into a bear, what are you going to do with your group? That's really for a friend who's listening tonight, because we were texting as we were listening to Brent as well. But, you know, talk about those scenarios in the wintertime. If you get up to that area on the backside of Second Peak in Mount Seymour Provincial Park, what would you do in that situation at that junction with the group you have based on your skills? Like, get right down into the nitty gritty and talk about what would you do? How would you make those decisions in the field? But you're going to talk about them before you even get in the field. So I think that would be my biggest piece, is to have that chat before and come up with scenarios. Let's say the three of us are heading out there and Scott breaks his ankle. What's Brent's role and what's mine? Who's communications? Who's first aid? Who's going to feed Scott? Who's going to dig the shelter? You know, chat about this stuff, and don't just leave it to the wind for when you get out there, because things will happen, big or small. Right?
It's going to make it challenging if you do like a meetup, if you've never met those people before. And like, you're going to have to be going, okay, first of all, is everyone taking an AST1 course? If you're going into things, it's,
yeah, which is so much more common. All of us here attending and all of us here on the screen can attest, you know, meetups are a thing now. People are meeting at the trailhead with those who they've never hiked or skied or snowshoed with before. Still have that conversation. I'm still going to encourage you. I'm going to challenge you to still have that conversation at the trailhead with those that you don't even know. Take the time to have a quick check-in, because, you know, my life is in your hands, whoever I'm with, and vice versa. So sound judgment, and don't hesitate in the field to turn around and come back another day, or don't go at all and save it, depending on weather, people.
Yeah, it's if you have to, you can go out and buy the person a beer. A bit, because you know what, you're right, I'm the one who wants to go, but you know what, I'm going to buy you the first round when we get back to the thing, and maybe that'll
I always love stashing a bag of chips in the truck. That's always the, like, you know, if we turn around right now, I got a bag of chips in the truck.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, I'll be joining you next time. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, just call me up when you're going up Seymour. We actually have some other things. We're actually we've had, by the way, people coming on and saying they took their AST1 with you, and they highly recommend
Awesome.
Brent specifically in the Canada West Mountain School. So there's a little bit of a promo there. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to take a very brief time. We're going to talk a little bit more about trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. There's a little video I'm going to get you to watch, but if you stick around to the end of it, you have a chance to win from our supporter, Canada West Mountain School, an AST1 course. And now you know what that is. And also a Reco reflector and a lamp from Bright Source. So lots and lots of stuff. All you'll have to do is answer a quick question, be the first one to answer, and you might win. So just stick around and watch this. See you on the other side.
So, you want to be AdventureSmart?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
But what is being AdventureSmart?
Being adventure smart is really all about taking responsibility for your own safety and following the 3 T's.
Got it. What are the 3 T's?
What are the 3 T's? The 3 T's are the trifecta of outdoor safety: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. The 3 T's can vary from person to person, activity to activity, and season to season. But here are some important ways to ensure you are prepared and safe on your next adventure. Trip planning. We could go on forever about this one. Trip planning is an essential step and one of the easiest ways we can stay safe on our adventures. This is something that should be done every time we head into the outdoors, whether for a few hours or multiple days. Trip planning can be broken down into 4 simple steps. Planning your travel route and navigation is about picking a trail or route based on its difficulty that's relative to your experience, ability, and the amount of time you have. Know your limits. Not all trails are created equal, so know the terrain and conditions. A 10-kilometer hike scrambling straight up a steep mountain is a lot different than a 10-kilometer stroll around a lake. Before you go anywhere, check the weather and keep checking it as things can change fast. This includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and sunset times. Finally, make sure you leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. Keep in mind, this may not be your mom or dad or best buddy. Choose someone you can count on if you were to get into trouble. A comprehensive trip plan might be as simple as sending your trusted contact a text or email with key information about your activity, or using the AdventureSmart app, which allows you to enter a detailed trip plan. Training doesn't mean being an elite athlete or being queen of the mountain on Strava. Training is a continuous process of outdoor recreation. It's about developing the necessary skills and abilities to be safe. This might include working your way up to that big summit hike, taking a few courses to expand your wilderness and backcountry knowledge, navigation and route finding courses, or even learning more advanced skills like rescue and emergency training. You have planned and trained. Now make sure you take the essentials. Taking the essentials means packing everything you potentially need to stay warm, safe, and dry if an emergency unexpectedly arises. What if you rolled your ankle or got hurt? What if you got lost and had to spend the night outdoors? Take the time and be prepared to look after yourself. So that's it. Those are the 3 T's.
That's it.
But no matter how hard you train, how well you trip plan, and how much essential gear you bring, you may still find yourself in an emergency. And that's okay. The wilderness can be unpredictable. If you find yourself in an emergency, it's important to stop, think, observe, and plan. Use that essential gear you brought to stay warm, dry, and safe, and contact 911 on your emergency communication device. Remember, search and rescue in BC is free for everyone. Remember, safety is an outcome of good trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. It's your responsibility. So let's all do our part and be adventure smart.
There we go. And we're back. Sandra, you were listening very carefully during Brent's presentation. Do you have some questions that we could ask people? And I'm going to look at the chat. So go over into the chat thing and type your answer. And the first person to answer the question will get a prize. And oh, look, we've got 2 people on. There we go.
Yay, I was going to ask Brent to bring on his ski buddy, so it's great to have
Perfect.
you aboard. That's great. Oh, and disappeared, but you're welcome to join us for this last little bit. Oh, there we
Yeah.
go. Thank you. Thank you for joining us and helping tonight. We appreciate your help.
I also wanted to
Okay,
mention
everyone in
that. Oh, sorry. I just was going to mention that whoever I do choose will actually send out information to you on the email address that you registered on. So fire away with the questions.
Thanks, Scott. So everyone get ready. Everyone who's participating tonight can answer their questions in the Q&A as Scott's guided. Brent talked about so many great things tonight, and really we could listen all over again. It was a great presentation, Brent. Thank you so much. And some excellent points as reminders for those of us who've had the training, which sounds like a few people who joined us tonight have, but an excellent introduction, which I hope makes people want to take more training. You made some great points. One of the points Brent and I, Scott, both loved was we're all trying to slide down the mountain, and so is the snow in certain points. You know, there's a few things the way you phrased, which were wonderful. But I've picked 3 questions. The first one will be to win the Reco reflector. And the question is, Brent talked about different types of terrain traps. He mentioned a few, but I'm just going to ask you to type in 2. List 2 types of terrain traps. And then you could win the Reco reflector. Now Scott gets to go and pick the first one that comes up. It usually pops up quickly. Oh, I can see it all coming through here.
Cameron managed to get in with the first one with 2. There was a person who came in with 1 before that, but he got the first one with 2, and he said cliffs and trees. Does that work for you?
Wonderful. Works well. Yeah, thanks for that piece of information. Those are great bits that Brent offered tonight. Okay, everybody get ready for the second question. This is a prize that will be offered to you from Bright Source Lighting. They've been headlamps, handheld light sources. They're just a great resource. So this is a great one. And we'll connect you all with these providers and supporters. Brent talked a lot about tonight and used a tool this evening. What tool did Brent suggest and reference and use this evening? It's an interesting name. Some of us are familiar with it.
Yeah, and so was Evan, who came out with the evaluator, as opposed to the evaluator. Perfect.
Yeah. I was wondering what we were going to see there for sure. Okay, last but not least, because we're a little bit over, and thank you for sticking around, everyone, and then we can wrap up. This is for the AST course. This is for the Avalanche Skills Training course with Canada West Mountain School. If you could be so lucky, Brent might be your instructor. Who knows? That's up to Canada West. This question is, and it was a great one because I love it when we can share what the community of outdoor education offers. The question is, what online resource did Brent suggest to use for you to help with your winter adventures? I refer to this organization as well. They are the experts in this field.
So the first person who came out with a trip planner, which I think is, wow, it's hard to get people.
To stop
oh my
answering.
gosh, there it is. Okay, so the first person who came out with the trip planner after you had asked the question was Chloe Wells. So good on Chloe.
Chloe. Awesome. Yeah, Avalanche Canada has so many awesome resources, and their trip planner is an excellent one. So again, thanks to the team there at Brent's house for joining us this evening and taking care of lighting and presentation. We appreciate your time and effort and all your wonderful offerings to the community. Scott, thanks again for a lovely webinar. Your support's greatly appreciated. We couldn't run the show without you. Trust me, we could not run the show without you. And to all the participants for taking the time to get informed. Again, this is our last one before the new year. The next one's January 11th. And the January 11th webinar, a lost skier is going to come on and share his story.
And he stayed overnight, didn't he? He was out for, wow, completely unexpected emergency overnight.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. So that's January 11th. You can sign up the same way you signed up for this one this evening. This is recorded. We're going to post it tomorrow on our YouTube over the next day or two. It'll be up again, so you can watch it again and learn more from Brent over and over. Pick pieces that you found interesting. But on behalf of the 3,400 search and rescue members in BC, on the 78 search and rescue groups, all of us here at the BC Search and Rescue Association with the BC AdventureSmart program, thank you. And we wish you a wonderful winter season on your adventures and happy holidays. Take care. Good night.
Good night, folks.